The President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. Counsel for Mr. Nuon Chea, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President, Your Honours. During the break, I spoke to my colleague, Mr. Sonaroon, and he has informed me that our client has in fact been able to give instructions, and that he has now signed a written withdrawal of his waiver, of his earlier waiver. We are now in the process of sending to the trial chamber and to all the parties via email a copy of his written withdrawal of his earlier waiver. I just want to tell you that right now. Thank you.
The President, counsel for Mr. Nuon Chea, please rise. Can you also tell the chamber, please, more precisely, concerning the withdrawal of the waiver of Mr. Nuon Chea? So we would like to be advised as to whether he has waived his right to be present entirely during the proceedings concerning the roles of Mr. Nuon Chea or other parts.
Thank you, Mr. President. I understand perfectly well the question. He has waived his right to be present during the presentation of the documents as so far it concerns his particular role. So the presentation of the prosecution in respect of the role of Mr. Khieu Samphan, we could continue. But the waiver, as I have discussed this with my colleague Sonaroon, that was the recommendation that we would give him. I presume that although I'm not able to read Khmer, obviously, I presume that is in fact the extent of his waiver.
The President, Judge Cartwright, you may now proceed.
Yes, thank you, President. I just want to clarify one thing, Mr. Kopi. You said he has waived his right to be present during the presentation, in effect, during the presentation of the documents relating to him. I presume you mean withdrawn that waiver, just to be quite clear.
I'm sorry, yes,
No,
yes.
Thank you very much.
The President. Thank you. The Chamber wishes to also inform the parties concerning the result of medical examination of Mr. Nguyen Jie submitted to the Chamber today. The treating doctors of Mr. Nguyen Jie at the Khmer Soviet Friendship Hospital conducted an examination and noted that his general condition is good. He coughs occasionally, but his body temperature is normal when his breath is also normal, although he's still weak and cannot get up without any assistance as yet. And the doctors also emphasize that his health condition improves better as opposed to yesterday. So this is the update on the medical report we have just obtained. Counsel for Mr. Kyew Sampong, we noted you were on your feet a moment ago. You may now proceed.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Good afternoon. And good afternoon, Your Honors, as well as good afternoon to all parties. I wish to submit a request at this particular stage of the proceedings on the presentation of documents to be filed by the Office of the Co-Prosecutors, and in particular relative to the documents regarding my client, Mr. Kyew Sampong. I wish at the very offset to recall to Your Honors the decision of the Chamber dated the 20th of June 2012. It is classified under E96/7 with specific reference to paragraph 22 of Your Honorable Chamber's decision, which is as follows. Within the ECCC legal framework, the Chamber considers that written statements or transcripts proposed to be put before the Chamber and which go to proof of the acts and conduct of an accused as charged in the indictment shall, subjected to the limited exceptions identified below, be regarded as not allowed under the law pursuant to Internal Rule 87(3)(d) and are inadmissible for this purpose unless the defense and allow me to just repeat the last sentence of this paragraph. That pursuant to the relevant internal rule, they are inadmissible for this purpose unless the defense has been accorded the opportunity of in-court examination of their authors. Mr. President, it is on that basis, the basis of your decision, that I hereby request that the co-prosecutor not be granted leave to present document number 20, and this is on the indicative list of documents to be used with respect to the role and act of Mr. Kyew Sampong, that's dated 30th January 10.18. This particular document is a letter addressed to Noronam Sihanouk. I would also request that he not be authorized to present document 70 of the same list, IS 20.35, E 190.1.172, E 190.1.1 Point 72. These are documents numbers 20, 70, and 71 and that were presented by the co-prosecutor with respect to the accused, Mr. Kyo Sompong. I would also further point out that there is an additional document, number 73, E3/464. I repeat, E3/464. As far as the letter concerning the deceased King Father, I would also indicate that in response to a list submitted by the co-prosecutors, there is in Annex B the following references: E9/14/1/1.12. ERN in English is as follows: 00 65 00 78. Under item number 35 of the same table, that the defense of Kyo Sompong has requested be summoned to testify is the King Noram Sihanouk, and the co-prosecutors had argued that such testimony would be void of any relevance. Therefore, we would respectfully request that the document concerning its author not be admitted, since there's no way to demonstrate its veracity. I would also ask you to bear in mind the decision that you handed down, and that you do not allow the co-prosecutor to present the documents relevant to my client. Thank you very much, Your Honours.
The President, co-prosecutor, you may now proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Your Honours. Good afternoon, Council. It is unfortunate that we have to start this presentation with a series of corrections as to the Council's legal submissions. The statements to which my learned friend referred are statements of individuals who are deceased, and such statements are subject to a different set of rules applicable at the international level. Those rules are in fact referred to in Your Honour's decision, from which my learned friend was reading, and had my learned friend continued to read, she would have reached paragraph 32, which describes and explains, in the words of Your Honours, that statements of individuals who are unavailable or deceased can be admitted into evidence even if they relate to the acts and conduct of the accused. So my learned friend's submissions are misguided. In fact, Your Honours have permitted these types of statements to be admitted, given that the authors are unavailable. That decision is fully consistent with international practice. So we invite Your Honours to refuse the application made by my learned friend and permit us to come to these documents and use them in the course of our presentation, which would in any event be likely tomorrow. So we will reach these documents tomorrow, and perhaps the Chamber can consider the matter following the hearing, or we're in your hands if you wish to rule now.
The President, thank you. Counsel for Mr. Kyo Sompong, you may now proceed.
Thank you, President. I believe that a clarification was required in response to the comments made by my friend across the way. When a written statement made by a deceased person regarding the acts and conduct of an accused must be admitted, it cannot be made during the proceedings, but it must be subject to a very specific application submitted to the Chamber, and it's under those circumstances that I hereby maintain our position.
The President, the Chamber would like to hand over to Judge Lavergne to address this issue. Judge Lavergne, you may now proceed.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, President. I shall be rather brief. Mr. Co-Prosecutor, the Chamber has heard the objections posed by the defense of Mr. Kyo Sompong with respect to certain documents. At this particular stage, the Chamber would like to know whether the documents that are being opposed by the defense for Mr. Kyo Sompong figures on the list that have been submitted before the Chamber, or if they are documents that are entirely new and are being introduced for the first time, in which case they would be subject to different rules and procedures. The Chamber has received documents on which E3 numbers have been accorded, but could you please specify the status of the documents in question? And we gather that you do not intend to have those documents presented or admitted this afternoon. Could you please specify as to whether you will be doing so this afternoon or tomorrow morning? Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Laverne. All of these documents were included in our Rule 80 list, which was submitted in April 2011. One of them was at that time, I believe, proposed by us as an additional document, and that is E190.1.72. I will, of course, verify overnight, and I will have that information ready first thing in the morning or even tonight. I don't propose to use these particular documents in the time we have remaining today, so I certainly will inform the Chamber and the parties, or rather confirm for the Chamber and the parties that they were on our Rule 80 list tonight, and if need be, we can provide further information verifying, at least in relation to one of the individuals, that he is deceased. But I stress we chose these particular statements because the authors are deceased and because they were evidence that we proposed to put before Your Honours. Thank you.
The President, thank you. We would like to now hand over to the prosecution to present the documents. Mr. Wainhart. Good afternoon, Mr. President, Your Honours. Good afternoon to my learned colleagues, and good morning, good afternoon to everyone. I am Wainhart with my colleague, Mr. Tariq Abdul Haq, will be presenting some documents concerning the role of Mr. Kyo Sompong. Your Honours will recall that on the 13th and 14th of February 2012, we conducted a presentation of documents relevant to the role of Kyo Sompong in the period preceding the 17th of April 1975. The documents we will present today build on that presentation. And so, we invite Your Honours to consider the documents shown in the two presentations together as they form part of the same continuum. I will provide a brief overview of our presentation, and then, with your leave, I will hand the floor over to my colleague who will present the documents. The documents we will be showing fall into the following categories. 1. Khieu Samphan's membership of high-level bodies within the Communist Party of Cambodia, including the Party Central Committee and his attendance at the meetings of the CPK Standing Committee. Number 2. Documents which relate to Khieu Samphan's role in the establishment of democratic Cambodia, the adoption of its constitution, the resignation of Norodom Sihanouk as head of state, and the establishment of the new presidium with Khieu Samphan as its head. Number 3. Documents which evidence Khieu Samphan's oversight of Democratic Cambodia's Ministry of Commerce, including numerous ministry reports addressed to Khieu Samphan. Number 4. Documents relating to arrests of Ministry of Commerce cadres who had been working in offices under Khieu Samphan's supervision. Number 5. Khieu Samphan's speeches, which contain endorsements of CPK policy and reflect his role in the party and in the Democratic Cambodia government. Number 6. Amnesty International correspondence addressed to Khieu Samphan during the Democratic Cambodia period, which sought to bring to his attention the mass crimes being committed in Cambodia. Number 7. Khieu Samphan's interviews and publications, including several video recordings, where the accused discusses his role during the Democratic Cambodia period, the crimes committed during the period, and his relationship with other leaders of the party. And number 8, Khieu Samphan's statements to the co-investigating judges, in which he further discusses his role. Of course, our time is limited, so it is impossible to present all documents which relate to Khieu Samphan's role. In this sense, the documents we will show are a representative sample of a larger body of evidence relating to the role of the accused. These documents are relevant because they show, among other things, Khieu Samphan's membership of the leadership of the Communist Party of Cambodia and Democratic Cambodia, his support for and contributions to the party's policies, his contemporaneous awareness of the crimes being committed in furtherance of those policies, and his vigorous defenses of those policies. Mr. President and Your Honors, I would like now to hand over the floor to my colleague, Mr. Tariq Abdul Haq. I am very grateful. The President, thank you. Before handing over to the co-prosecutor, the Chamber wishes to also inform the public concerning the health condition of Mr. Nguyen Chie. According to the report we obtained from the Khmer Soviet Friendship Hospital, the report indicates that Mr. Nguyen Chie is to be discharged from the hospital tomorrow at 2 p.m. In the report, it states clearly that Mr. Nguyen Chie had been admitted to the hospital since the 13th of January, and he had been admitted to the hospital for 14 days until the day he will be discharged. The report signed by Dr. Kum Samsan and approved by the Vice Director of the Khmer Soviet Friendship Hospital. Next, we would like to hand over to Mr. Tariq Abdul Haq to present the documents.
Thank you, Mr. President. And as I commence, if I may indicate first that in the brief time, as my colleague was addressing the court, I checked our Rule 80 list, and indeed all of the documents to which counsel for Khieu Samphan objected earlier were on our list in April 2011, but I will confirm that by email with specific references to the annexes so that that's easy to verify. Your Honours, we'd like to begin our presentation of documents relevant to the role of Khieu Samphan with a look at the statements which Khieu Samphan has made to the co-investigating judges. These documents are relevant because they are recent. They address specifically some of the allegations against Khieu Samphan, and they state for the record his version of the events. They also contain a number of important factual admissions by Khieu Samphan about his role within the party. It was in late 2007, Your Honours, that Khieu Samphan made 4 statements before the co-investigating judges, and I will give the E3 numbers so that they're available for the record. They are E3/557. This was, in fact, an adversarial hearing at which Mr. Khieu Samphan made a statement. The next was E3/27. This was his first actual interview with the co-investigating judges on the 13th of December. Then there are 2 further interviews on the 14th of December 2007. The first is E3/37 and the second E3/210. This was in December 2007. By February 2008, Mr. Khieu Samphan decided to cease cooperation and giving statements to the co-investigating judges and asserted a right to remain silent, and this is found in E3/702. If I can go first to the interview of the 13th of December 2007, which, as I indicated, was E3/27. By way of overview, this document discusses a number of facts relevant to this case, including Khieu Samphan's whereabouts in the immediate days preceding the fall of Phnom Penh, his presence at Udong together with Pol Pot and a number of other senior members of the party. It also contains discussion about Mr. Khieu Samphan's work from 1970 to 1975, then goes on to discuss the entry into Phnom Penh and his whereabouts in Phnom Penh together with Pol Pot and Nguyen Chia in 1975. And lastly, he discusses also the composition of the Standing Committee and of the Central Committee, as well as the frequency of meetings of the Standing Committee. My colleague Bill Smith referred to this document earlier and read from it, so I will not spend a lot of time on it, certainly not cover the same portions, but I may read one passage in particular because it relates to Mr. Khieu Samphan's actions around the 17th of April. And if we could show this document on the screen, the relevant ERNs are Khmer 00156-614, French 00156-666, and English 00156-743. And here, Khieu Samphan is responding to a question as to where he had come to where he had come from when he entered Phnom Penh. And this is his response, quote, "For about 10 days, I had been at the headquarters of Pol Pot to the west of Udong. I would like to assert that I did not participate in the work of the headquarters. I was just present in the headquarters and observed the events, upon which Pol Pot briefed me once in a while." Question: who else was present with you at the time? Answer: I think that there were just the two of us. Nguyen Chia may have been there too, but I'm not sure. There were also some commanders from the army who commanded the battle to overthrow Phnom Penh, who came on a regular basis. Tamok, or his deputies, in brackets, who was the commander of the northern zone, or Khoi Tuan, or his deputy, Kay Pok. And there may have been Sao Pim as well, commander of the eastern zone, but he only came occasionally. The next question is, was Son Sen present at the time? And answer: yes, of course, but he had his own headquarters. The next passage is 2 pages down. Khieu Samphan is asked, between 1970 and 1975, did you stay permanently with the Khmer Rouge leaders? Response: yes, because my role was to establish the liaison with King Norodom Sihanouk. And when the United Front of Kampuchea was established after the coup d'etat in 1970, Prince Norodom Sihanouk knew neither Pol Pot nor Tamok. I was the only one who could establish relations with the prince. I will just indicate briefly for the record that the next section of that same interview deals with the whereabouts of Pol Pot, Nuon Chea and Khieu Samphan upon arrival in Phnom Penh, and he indicates essentially that they stayed together initially at the railway station, then at the Silver Pagoda, and ultimately at the riverfront. And the final relevant portion for present purposes is found, again, a few pages on. This is at Khmer ERN 00156-619, French 00156-672, and Khmer, I apologize, in English 00156-751. The importance of this passage is simply that Khieu Samphan acknowledges that he was a member of the Central Committee, first as a candidate member in 1971 until 1976 when he became a full rights member. Immediately below that passage, he is asked the following question. You have said that you participated in, quote, expanded, end quote, meetings of the Standing Committee. Can you tell us about this participation? Response, the introductory submission has indicated that I had participated in 14 out of 19 meetings. I forget the exact number, but it's around that, given that I'm only aware of the meetings I attended. As I have already explained, during the course of those meetings, the issues of national defence, the national reconstruction, as well as the conflict between Vietnam and Democratic Kampuchea were discussed. I will move on to the next document, Your Honours, and this is the next interview on the 14th of December, E3/37. And in this document, by way of a summary, Khieu Samphan describes the appointments to Office 870, that is the appointment of Duon and Khieu Samphan himself. He also describes his cohabitation at Office K3 with other leaders, and he also touches upon the issue of the speeches he gave as President of Democratic Kampuchea. I'm going to be selective in the passages I read. In the very first question and answer, Khieu Samphan says the following. This is at Khmer ERN 00156-675, French 00156-680, and English 00156-753. The question is as follows. Earlier you said that Suavasi, alias Duon, was the chairman of Office 870. How long did he fulfill this function, and who was his successor? Response. He was appointed when Pol Pot established his office on the Tonle Basak riverfront after leaving the Silver Pagoda around June 1975. He was arrested in 1977, but I only discovered that fact after the fall of the Khmer Rouge, that is, after 1979. I was not surprised by his absence because, as I have said, each of us had to concentrate on his or her own tasks. He travelled quite a lot, Duon. The next passage is on the next page, and it relates to the membership of Office 870, a topic I referred to earlier. Question: could you describe the structure and composition of Office Munti 870? Response: it was one office of the Standing Committee. It had only 2 members, Duon and me. Duon was the chairman, assisted by colleagues such as Pong, and he was in charge of political affairs. As for me, as I mentioned earlier, I was in charge of preparing the price list for the cooperatives and the distribution of goods to the zones under direction from the Standing Committee. And I also had to maintain relations with King Norodom Sihanouk. The next passage I wish to refer to is at Khmer ERN 00156-677, French 00156-683, and English 00156-756, and it relates to the functions of Office 870. Question: what were the other functions of Office 870 besides the functions you have described? Answer: at first, this office was not so important, but at a later stage, it gained in importance because it was tasked to monitor suspected members of the party for the Standing Committee. I learned this after the revolution collapsed, when I reached Pailin. The last passage in this document is 2 questions down, and this is the last passage that I wish to read from this document today. It relates to the speeches that Khieu Samphan gave and the content of those speeches. Question: did you agree with the content of those speeches you made? And if you disagreed with the content, could you give us an example of such disagreement? Response: generally, I agreed with the content because there was an ultimatum imposed by Vietnam in May 1976. I recall that I was appointed President of the State Presidium in April 1976. But on certain points, I disagreed with what was said in the speeches. For instance, the elimination of the currency, which resulted in the absence of small industry or handicraft development. And a little bit further down, I could not make my disagreement public because we did not want to reveal to the public that there were disagreements within the party itself. What is more, I would not have survived if I dared to reveal any disagreement or objection to anything. The obvious example of that was the case of Hu Nim and Hu Yun. Your Honours, and the final document from which I will read from the collection of Khieu Samphan's OCIJ interviews is E3/210. It essentially continues on the theme of fear and arrests to which Khieu Samphan referred, the disappearances and arrests of Hu Yun and Hu Nim. This is at Khmer ERN 00156-689, French 00156-694, and English 00156-948. Question. This morning you indicated that the arrest of Hu Nim and Hu Yun were evidence that it was impossible to express any disagreement. So you knew about the arrests and executions. The response to that proposition is as follows. I brought up the examples of Hu Nim and Hu Yun, but I only learned the information about the arrest of these two people after 1979. Question. Is it not contradictory, on the one hand, to confirm that you learned of the arrest of the two people only after 1979, and on the other hand, to mention that you lived under threat before 1979? Response. I do not know how to explain to you more clearly. At that time, there was an ultimatum imposed by Vietnam. Pol Pot himself and the CPK felt threatened. This situation meant that it was not possible to envisage any dissidents. Question. Do you still maintain that you did not learn of any arrests before 1979? Response. Not any. I observed that some members of the Central Committee disappeared, one after another. I could not inform you about the names because I was not close to them. Nonetheless, I did not know the exact extent of the arrests at the time. And before we leave this document, a couple more brief passages. He alleges on the following page that he only learned of the extent of the massacres at the end of 1998. He learned of the extent of the massacres at the end of 1998 through his readings. Now, coming back to another topic of interest, or rather, for the moment, just to close off the issue of arrests, I'll quote from a passage which appears at Khmer ERN 00156-691, French 00156-966, and English 00156-949. And he discusses his knowledge, or the extent of his knowledge, during the democratic Kampuchea period. In relation to the excesses which had been denounced during auto-criticism, I would like to give you an example. A number of cadre believed it appropriate to punish those who committed adultery by shaving half the hair from their heads and exposing them to the public. Such mistakes were denounced and corrected. In relation to the arrests in Preah Vihear province, they did occur, but the prisoners were released. There were breaches committed at the local level, but the leaders did not approve them. Finally, in relation to the disappearance of the members of the Central Committee and the Standing Committee, everyone seemed to approve, but I did not know the extent or the scope of the arrests. Finally, in this document, a reference to the evacuation of Phnom Penh and the feelings of Khieu Samphan during that period. This is at Khmer ERN 00156-690, English 00156-949, and French 00156-966. Pertaining to the evacuation of Phnom Penh, I clearly realized that the population might have fallen along the way. That is why, after the fall of the movement, I asked myself the reason why the movement in which I believed made this kind of decision, which deviated from the movement's principles. The relevance of that last passage, Your Honours, is that it contains a statement in which Khieu Samphan purports to express a concern in April 1975 on his part regarding the suffering that was being inflicted on the population. We will see shortly what Khieu Samphan was saying publicly in that period. The next topic to which I would like to turn now, Your Honours, has to do with the role which Khieu Samphan played in the Communist Party of Kampuchea, in the upper echelons of the party, and also within the institutions of democratic Kampuchea, and furthermore, the contributions that are reflected in the documents that we have available to us. If I could turn now to document E3/182. E3/182. This document was referred to earlier today by my colleague. It is a minute of the Standing Committee meeting of the 9th of October 1975. We will only look at it for a brief moment. And to build on my colleague's discussion of this document, of course, the document contains a delegation of work and operational processes. And if we look at the first page, in all three languages, the delegation of work and operational processes has an order where number 1 is Comrade Secretary, number 2 is Deputy Secretary, and number 3 is Comrade Van, or Ying Siri, of course number 2 being Nguyen Chia. And we see that number 4 is Comrade Hem, whose responsibilities are indicated as follows: responsible for the front and the royal government, and commerce for accounting and pricing. What is relevant to observe on this document is that 2 individuals who are members of the Standing Committee, that is under number 6, Comrade Khieu Son Sen, and number 7, Comrade Vaughan, or Vaughan Vet, appear in this list below Comrade Hem, or Khieu Samphan. A similar order can be seen in another document, which I will just refer to without showing it on the screen. This is document E3/858, and it is a list of bodyguards and other staff assigned to the officers with various designations in Phnom Penh. And in that document, we see that the listing is similar in that we have K1 at the top, K1 of course being the workplace and residence of Pol Pot. Below that we have at K3 Uncle 2, below him Brother Van or Ying Siri, and below him Brother Hem or Khieu Samphan. Below Khieu Samphan, Brother Vaughan. Your Honours, my colleague discussed earlier the frequency of meetings of the Standing Committee. And it is interesting to look at the attendance at those meetings from the perspective of the attendance of Khieu Samphan. We have been able to identify a total of 23 meetings of the leadership of the party. Now, some of these meetings are identified as being meetings of the Standing Committee, others are not, but the membership or the attendance of the individuals at the meeting indicates that it is a meeting of leading cadre or the leaders of the party, insofar as Pol Pot, Nguyen Chia and other members of the Standing Committee are present. Out of these 23 sets of meeting records, only 19 contain lists of individuals attending. Within those 19, Khieu Samphan is recorded as attending 16, or somewhere in the vicinity of 84% of the meetings. The only people attending more frequently than Khieu Samphan are Pol Pot, who attended 17 meetings, and Nguyen Chia, who attended 18. Other members of the Standing Committee, including Son Sen and Vaughan Vet, attended 10 or less meetings of this body. Mr. President, I'm mindful of the time. I can continue for a few more minutes with 2 documents or so, or I can stop here if you would prefer me to do so. I will continue. We now move on to considering the events in 1975 which relate to the return of the late King Father Norodom Sihanouk to Cambodia, and in that context to his resignation from his then role as the head of state and his replacement by Khieu Samphan. We would like to now play a brief video for Your Honours, and there are in fact 2 segments totalling approximately 3 minutes. They come from document D295/2/2.23R. That is D295/2/2.23R. And with your permission, Mr. President, I would ask the AV unit to play these 2 segments. They are designated in our table, which the AV unit has as segments A1 and A2.
The President, you may proceed. AV officer, please play the video clip as requested by the prosecutor.
And if I could ask the AV unit also to play the next segment, which is A2. It is only 1 minute long. Of course, Your Honours, what we're viewing is video footage of the return of Norodom Sihanouk from China to Cambodia, and we see there that he's accompanied by Khieu Samphan.
The President, you may proceed. AV officer, please play the clip as per the request by the co-prosecutor.
This footage dates from around September 1975, and we will now trace the events as they pertain to the fate of the then Prince Norodom Sihanouk and the establishment of new institutions of democratic Kampuchea. Mr. President, should I continue with the next document, or would you like me to stop here?
The President. Thank you, Mr. Prosecutor. The time is now convenient for the day adjournment. The Chamber will adjourn now and resume tomorrow on the 31st of January 2013, starting from 9 a.m. in the morning. And tomorrow hearing will be dedicated to the presentation of documents concerning the co-accused to be presented by the prosecutor. Is there any issue with the translation? Once again, the time is now convenient for the day adjournment. The Chamber will resume tomorrow starting from 9 o'clock in the morning. Tomorrow the Chamber will hear the presentation concerning key documents relevant to the roles of the accused to be presented by the prosecutors. Any observation or objections of concerned party to this presentation will be also heard. This is the information for the parties as well as members of the public. Security guards are instructed to bring the co-accused back to the detention facilities and have them back before 9 o'clock. And the co-accused shall remain in the holding cell downstairs where the audio-visual equipment is there for them to follow the proceeding remotely. The court is now adjourned.